Okay, so ready for a deep dive? We're jumping into an education book from the 1920s.
From the 1920s.
I know, right? But hang with me. It's called The Knowledge of Man by Charlotte Mason. She was way ahead of her time when it came to teaching.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's this book all about?
Well, it's about this question: how do we take these young minds and help them grow into, awesome citizens, responsible people? It's a big one, right?
Still relevant today, that's for sure.
Totally. And Mason, she had some really fascinating ideas about how to do it.
Like what?
So get this, she believed in this idea of inspiration in education, especially when it came to teaching kids about citizenship.
Inspiration, huh? So not just like dates and battles and all that.
No, not just memorizing facts. She thought stories were the key, especially biographies. Like, she loved Plutarch's lives.
Ah, Plutarch, all those Roman emperors and Greek generals. Those are some good stories.
Right, and that was her point. Those stories, they're not just entertaining. They show you courage, ambition, betrayal. They make history feel real, human.
So it's like, instead of just learning about history, you get to step into the shoes of these historical figures.
Exactly. You grapple with the same kinds of dilemmas they faced. Makes you think, how would I handle that?
That's powerful. We're hardwired for stories, right? It's how we connect.
Totally. And I think it makes you wonder, are there better ways to learn about, civic duty, responsibility, all that, than just dry facts? Maybe we could all use a little more storytelling in our lives, even as adults.
100% agree. Although, here's where Mason gets even more interesting. She wasn't afraid to keep things real.
Oh, how so?
Well, she was actually against using stories that were like too idealistic, where the heroes are perfect and everything's sunshine and roses.
So no sugarcoating history then.
Exactly. She even used the example of like Jacob from the Bible. He wrestled with angels, had this whole epic life, but he was also flawed. He made mistakes.
That's such a good point, because real life is messy. And even our heroes, historical or modern day, nobody's perfect.
Exactly. And I think by presenting these like more nuanced figures, even flawed figures from the past, she was trying to prepare kids for a world where there isn't always a clear right or wrong answer.
Makes you think about how we teach history today. Do we shy away from the complexities? Are we doing a disservice to young people by presenting this like sanitized version of the past?
It's a question worth thinking about for sure. Yeah, it really does make you think, like, how do we grapple with that, right? And Mason, she had this idea that, one way to really prepare young minds to deal with those complexities, was through, get this, rigorous academic work.
Whoa, hold on. Are you saying like hitting the books is going to make you a better person?
In a way, yeah. She believed in this almost like an anti-empty mind theory, Keep the mind active, challenged, learning, and it's less likely to wander off into trouble.
Okay, so like idle hands, right? Idle hands are the devil's workshop, but for your brain.
Yeah. Exactly. Though knowing Mason, she probably would have said idle minds are the devil's workshop.
Ah.
But you see the connection. She saw studying, like deep, focused studying, as a way to build focus, discipline, even a kind of moral strength.
Interesting. And I guess those are qualities that, well, they're always going to be important, right?
Absolutely. If anything, even more important now. Think about it. The world Mason was writing in the 1920s. So different, right?
Totally. No internet, no smartphones, way fewer distractions.
Exactly. Back then, the challenge was getting kids to put down, a comic book and pick up, say, a challenging history book.
Yeah.
But now, it's like, how do we even compete with all the stimulation?
Right. It's like you're competing with a million different things for their attention.
Exactly. And that's why I think Mason's emphasis on structure, on a really carefully thought out progression of learning, that's what's so fascinating.
Now that you mention it, the excerpt we have, there's that table, right?
Yeah.
The one that lists specific books and topics for each grade.
Exactly. It's like a little peek into how structured education was back then.
It's true. And it does make you wonder about the balance, right? Like, how much structure is too much? How much is not enough? I mean, that's a question every generation probably grapples with. When do you introduce certain ideas, certain historical figures? Big stuff.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, how would Mason approach education today with all the distractions and information overload?
Right. Like, we're talking about an anti-empty mind at a time when boredom is basically, what, a luxury?
It's true. Think about it. When Mason was writing boredom, that was just part of life.
Oh, totally. No screens to stare at. You had to find ways to entertain yourself.
Exactly. So back then, the challenge was getting kids to engage deeply with a book with their own thoughts. But now, The challenge is teaching them how to filter, to focus, to think critically about all this information that's coming at them nonstop.
It's like a whole different set of skills, right?
Exactly, like a whole new set of mental muscles. It makes you wonder.
It makes you wonder, right? Like, what if a little boredom, maybe it's not such a bad thing.
Maybe. It's funny because in a way, she was kind of getting at that, wasn't she? Even back then.
With the whole anti-empty mind idea.
Yeah. But think about it. When you're bored, what happens?
Yeah.
Your mind, it starts to wander. It looks for something to latch onto, makes its own connections.
And maybe that's where the good stuff happens, those aha moments.
Exactly. It's like we're so busy trying to fill every second with something, anything, to keep our minds from being bored, that we're actually missing out on those moments of, like, deep thought.
Right. Because if you're always plugged in, always stimulated, when do you ever have time to just, like, think for yourself, to really process things?
Exactly. And it makes me think back to that part in the book about the child who compares themselves to Julius Caesar. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Powerful image. Even just a quick story, a little glimpse into history, it can totally change how you see yourself.
It's true. And it makes you realize, all those stories we're surrounded by, they're shaping us too. The books we read, the movies we watch, even the stuff we see online, it all adds up.
It's like we're constantly trying on different identities, different ways of being in the world, just like that kid with Julius Caesar.
And the question is, whose shoes are we asking young people to try on today? What kind of stories are we putting out there?
Because whether we realize it or not, we're all shaping young minds, right?
Yeah.
Just by being in the world, the things we say, the choices we make.
It's a lot of responsibility when you think about it. But it's also, I think, what makes this whole conversation about education so important.
Totally. Because it's not just about what happens in the classroom. It's about everything. It's about how we live our lives.
It's about what we value, what we prioritize, the example we set.
And those are conversations. Well, it's like this book, right? Even though it's, almost 100 years old, still relevant today.
100%. And on that note, a huge thank you to everyone listening.
Yes, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It just goes to show you never know where these conversations might lead.